Okay, so welcome to SAL 1046 Multimedia, and today we're going to do a short tutorial on GIMP 2.8, and we're going to create this photo that you see here, which requires 3 photos in total. It requires the tulips in the sky, and it requires the baby photo, and then we're going to do some texting and some shadowing on the texting, and then we're also going to add another layer of gradient. So all in all, you can see that once we've storyboarded this entire project, that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers in total to make this simple picture. So let me just close this, and we'll begin from scratch, and we'll see what we come up with. So the first thing we have to do is go to our folder and find out where our images live, and I have them over here in our practice modules in transparency, text, shadows, baby tulips. So here we go. I always keep my original separate because we don't want to overwrite those, but we'll drag and drop those into our project here now. So I'll pull in the yellow tulips and drop that in there. And the other method that we can use to do that, instead of drag and drop, if you want to use this method, we can also do a file and open. So this is just another way of doing it, and we can choose the young boy and choose to open it, and you notice that we get both pictures because we need to work with both of these pictures here to make it work. So step 1, I guess what we can do is we can work on the baby portion. First thing that we need to do is we need to go through here and make sure that we include some transparency. So if I go to erase right now and I change the size of my eraser, you notice that when I erase, everything just comes out white. Control Z, undo. I'm going to go back in here to layer, and I'm going to choose to do a transparency and add an alpha channel, and that is our transparency. So I'll click on that. And now what you'll notice when I erase, you'll notice that it shows a checkerboard pattern. That checkerboard pattern that you see there is actually invisibility or transparency. It allows us to place this picture or this person against any other color background. Now I could spend a lot of time going around here and using my eraser tool to go here and then go and work the edges, etc., etc., etc. I'm just going to Control Z to undo that, and Control Z again. I'm going to show you how to do it with a new tool that we haven't used before. So these are the intelligent scissors, or scissor select tool. They're intelligent in that what happens is they'll follow the contour of whatever shape it is that you're trying to cut out. So we'll grab the intelligent scissors, and just right above the head, we just basically need the shape of the body, and straight across here and there. We don't need to cut out the legs on the floor. I mean, we can if you want. You can start anywhere. I'm just going to drop a dot here, left mouse button, drop a dot, and then drop another dot over here, and you'll notice that that curves right around his head. I'll drop another dot here and here, and you can see that I'm just basically outlining the shape, and it follows the contours nicely. If I get some peaks and valleys here, I kind of might zoom in on those particular areas. I'm not overly concerned with maintaining it perfectly, but just for fun, I'll cut out. And you'll see again that it follows the shape fairly well. And just outlining. Dropping those dots in right here at the jawline. I'll try to keep most of that ear if I can. If not, I can go in and touch that up later. The last one that you need to make sure that we do here is we need to end on the same dot that we began. So you'll see that there's a little plus sign above the scissors, and when that plus sign will change to an infinity symbol, or like a lock, or 2 links. Okay, so you can see the difference when I'm right on that circle. So I want to complete the loop. So there we go. It won't be exactly perfect, but it's a pretty quick way of getting a cutout. So we've already set the transparency. If I just hit if I click in the middle here, you'll see that I have a round circle now above the scissors, which shows that we've completed the loop. So I'll click here in the center, and you'll see that we have what I call the marching ants around our figure. And if I hit my delete key now, what you'll notice is that it takes the baby out. So Control Z, not really what I want to do. I want to take the outside out. So what I have to do is I have to say, don't take this, take the outside. And to do that, I'm going to invert. Make it the opposite. So to invert, I'll come up to Select. I'll choose Invert. And now you'll see that I have more marching ants are right around the outside here. And when I hit Delete, okay, you'll see that it saves that. And when you're finished and you're happy with your product, you'll want to go into you'll stop those marching ants by going into Select and None. All right, and you can see that we have a little bit of work left to do, and we can fix that once we get over into the other portion. So I'm happy with that. So we'll go ahead and we'll keep working here. Probably should save often. If I'm going to save this whole project, I want to go File, Save As, choose a location to save it. I don't want to save it in the originals folder. I want to save it separate from that. So I'll put it outside of that folder, and I'll call it Baby Tulips XCF. And I'll say go ahead and save it. So the XCF extension is a project extension for GIMP and GIMP only. So I'm saving it as an XCF. So that maintained those two images within this project folder. All right. So next I want to work on this image here. So again, if I know I want to do transparency, I'll probably want to go in here, set my layer, set my transparency, and add an alpha channel to that as well. So now I have some transparency on here. Now if I wanted to, I could use these scissors again and cut some stuff out, but I don't necessarily need to separate these two images. I just want to be able to get these tulips and then replace them again right on top of where they are now. So for that to happen, the easiest thing for me to do in this case is to say layer and duplicate layer. So now I have two layers. I have my background and I have another layer here that I can turn on and off. So I should name them. So I'm going to double click here. I'm going to type background, hit my enter key to save that. I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to say tulips only, and I'll hit my enter key to save that. And I want to work on the tulips only layer. I'm going to keep this as my background, and what I want to do here is I want to remove the sky area. So again, I could use my intelligent scissors or smart scissors and draw dots all the way around here, or we could use a different tool. Now luckily for us, we have a nice solid color here of blue, which means that we can use another tool that will help us to select quickly. And that tool here is called your fuzzy select tool. I like to call it the magic wand. Now the magic wand will do some pretty cool stuff in that when I choose this, and normally by default it's right on here on this mode here, which is replace the current selection. If I click here, it will make that selection, but if I click over here, it will make a different selection. So it's not the same color blue all the way across, so I might have to select in more than one place to get everything. But if I make that selection, I can go ahead and hit delete. Now it doesn't look like anything happened, and that's because we have this picture in the background and it's still poking through, and it's the same picture, so it looks like nothing's happened. But if I turn this picture off, my background off, you're going to notice that you have this happening, okay, which is exactly what we want. We want to create that transparency, and that checkerboard tells us that that area is indeed transparent. So I'm just clicking in the blue and clicking in the blue, and it's making some broad selections for me. I'm clicking down in here. I need to get rid of that blue, and maybe down in here and get rid of that blue. And again, the easiest way is to zoom in. So I've done some quick saves on that. I'm just seeing if there's anything else in here. I can see that when I hold my left mouse button down, there are some areas that are going to show up that it didn't get. It's not perfect, but it gets a lot of stuff all at once. If you notice later on that you have some stray pixels, that are kind of peeking out, and I'm just doing that by holding my left mouse button down. You can go back in with the eraser later on and clean those up, which we will do. Okay, or if you'd like to now, again, if I go to use my eraser, it's not going to work because I still have something selected. So remember, go in and choose Select None. And then I can go in and clean that up, which we'll do in a little bit. So I've got my 3 photos. I've got my baby worked on. I've got my background. I've got my tulips. Now my goal is to somehow get my baby between this layer and that layer. So let's see if we can do it. I'll turn on my other layer again so we can see that happening there. I'm going to come over here, and you can choose to edit and to copy. And then you can choose to back over on this side here. Make sure you choose this photo, and we're going to go edit, paste as, and we're going to paste it as a new layer. Now, of course, all of the faults you'll see, I've chopped off too much of the baby's ear and a few other things that I'll have to go in and maybe fix up. But we can go in and work on this layer here now that I see that I've got some problems. So I need to do some erasing around here, clean that up a bit. I should rename that layer right away, though. I'll name that baby so I know that I'm on that, and hit my enter. It's really important to remember that you always need to click on the layer that you want to work on. Alright, so if I go grab my eraser now, which I'm doing, and you'll notice that if I start to erase over here, the flowers aren't erasing, but all of a sudden that does, okay, because it's only going to erase that layer. And of course I don't want to take off that much. So I need to readjust the size of my brush so I can bring the size of my brush down, and that might work there. And I might want a softer brush around the edge of the head, so I might want to choose this brush instead. And then I can come in here, and I may want to zoom in so I can be very careful. So I'll grab this tool here, the display navigation, and I'll zoom in, and then I can move here to the top of the baby's head and say, alright, I'll just try to clean this up. Now of course the farther you're zoomed in, we're going to take the ear right off. Please don't tell anybody. The farther you're zoomed in, the more control you have. So I'm going to zoom that in and kind of give the baby a little haircut. I'm doing this quite quickly. I made a mistake there, and you see that it undid everything I did. So you might want to do it, work in smaller increments. Let go of your left mouse button every now and again, so that you only undo a little bit when you undo. And again, try not to be too bumpy lumpy. And I'm just trying to clean up the edge there a little bit. There. Take that down. And if you see anything else that, like right here on the cheek, you might want to go in there. And again, you can zoom in more, and you can decrease the size of your brush. And of course, the farther in you go, the less jagged it's going to be. If you don't want to erase too much, if you just want to kind of smooth out these edges, you can drop the opacity here, and you can go, probably too much there. You can go right on the edge. You might want to drop the opacity, and I might want to change to a blur tool. Drop the opacity on the blur tool, and you can maybe soften up the edge of his shirt, or if you think his head's a little bit too jaggedy, you can just kind of stick on the outside there and maybe smooth that edge out just by using that blur tool and a little bit of opacity, and that'll smooth that edge right out. Now you kind of have to, every picture is a little bit different. You kind of have to look at it and say, okay, that'll work for that one, but it might not work for something else. Okay, the nice thing about working in layers is it's not affecting those flowers at all, but it is allowing me to maybe just smooth out the edges of the shirt, because you can see that it has some jaggedies there. You don't want to overuse this, But again, the technique that I used is I'm really down on the opacity, and I've softened up my brush somewhat. So I don't want it to be overly visible that I've done this, but I do want to clean it up somewhat so it looks a little bit softer. And I think I kind of like that. I can smooth over on the cheek over on this side here and try to smoothen that up just a little bit. So that opacity tool works quite well. And once you're done playing with that, with between your eraser and your smudge tool and your opacity, you can kind of roll back and take a look at your work, and that looks actually pretty good. I only have one problem right now, is that my baby needs to be behind the tulips and the baby's not. Now it gives you the option, sometimes you can, depending on where you are, you can drag this down to the next layer, and that will put the baby underneath that layer. Or down below here, you're going to see these arrows that allow you to move whatever layer you have selected up and down. So I'm just going to go down, and it goes behind one layer. If I go down again, it's going to go behind both layers, and I want it to be in between. So there's my baby peeking out from behind the flowers. Now if I want to move that baby, of course you want to select that layer that you're working on, grab the move tool, and we can pull the baby up. But when you do, all of a sudden against his shirt, you can start to see these stray pixels, or things that didn't get cleaned up. And of course that's going to be on this layer, and we don't want those there, so we are going to have to clean those up a bit. So we'll grab your eraser. We don't want to have any opacity on that. We just want to take those out of there. So I'm just seeing those little things that are showing up, and I'm just going in and cleaning up. Be careful around the edges of the flowers. I mean, if you really want to go and be specific, again, using that zoom tool is great. Takes you right in, and all of a sudden you can see, wow, I got some jaggedy stuff there, and you might really want to come in with a smaller brush, and maybe even something that size there, and you might even want to choose a different style. But that allows me to get right in there and do a good job. I can go around all of my flowers this way, and when I see those stray pixels kind of hanging out, like right there, I can move this around, and if I see a stray pixel, there's some pixels right here, I can erase those, and if I want to smooth the edge of my flower out, I can. Some more stray pixels, some more stray pixels. So again, how clean do you want it to be? I should say, at what level of professionalism do you want to work? So again, we're just kind of going around on the outside of that. Have some more pixels down here. We'll clean up those. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. Alright, and again, you can just kind of trace the whole outside of the flower and see where you need to do some fixing. I'm going quite quickly here just because I know that have some time constraints, and that the sound of my voice is probably lulling you to sleep, so listen to the sound of my voice. So I'm just doing a quick cleanup here and following over here, seeing if there's anything else I want to clean up. Probably, yeah. And again, given more time, we could go in and clean up all of that area. So okay, I'm happy with that. I don't see anything else left on the shirt. Go back to zoom out 1 to 1, and there we go. We've cleaned up some of that. Now, what I want to do is I want to take that picture and I want to flip that, because I've got a light source coming in here on this side of the tulips, but the light source here is hitting the side of the baby's head. So it's like I have two different light sources. Not that that's impossible, but if we think about it from a natural way, if the sunlight is coming this way, instead of studio lighting, 3-point studio lighting, if we're just going with natural sunlight, we probably just have a light source coming from this side here. Sometimes in photography we can hold a reflector on this side and reflect some light back, but it certainly wouldn't be that bright. Alright, so we'll use the flip tool. So I'm going to make sure I go back to my layers, choose the baby, because that's the layer that I want to flip. I don't want to flip my tulips. I'm going to grab my flip tool, and I will click on the baby, and the baby is now facing the opposite direction. The light sources are both coming in on the same side. And again, I can use my move tool and place my baby wherever it is that I want my baby to be. So that looks actually pretty Pretty good. Now again, if your baby's head is too big, which can happen, you might want to do a scaling. Now a scaling, there's a couple of different ways we can do. We can scale image, or we can scale layer. If we scale the image by clicking on image and go to scale image, and let's say that I take this down to maybe 400 and see what that looks like, and hit enter, and you'll see that that bottom number changes as well. If I hit scale, it scales everything. It scales the entire image. I don't want to scale the entire image, I just want to scale just the baby. So I'm going to Control Z this, and I'm going to say, okay, just the baby. So I'm going to select that layer. I'll go into Layer, and I'm going to choose Scale Layer. So there's my scale layer. I'm going to try to take this down to, I'll try 375. Hit enter, and you'll see that that bottom number changes to maintain the proportion. I'll scale that, and now my baby fits perfectly in that picture. Excellent. I'll grab my move tool. I can slide my baby up a little bit and over, get his chin up off the flower, and I like that. That looks pretty darn good. Okay. All right. I'm happy with that. You know, I might want to go back in later on if I were really working this and darken up this area somewhat, just because it's fairly bright. I might want to try to soften that tone on that side of the face, but it's also pretty bright on the side of the flower, so we'll leave it for now. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3 layers. Now what we want to do is we want to add some text. Now the thing about adding text is text will add its own layer, so we don't have to say, hey, new layer. Just by selecting the text button, I'm just going to change these colors here for a second. Just by, this is what you normally have, would be black and white. So just by selecting this text color, or this text tool, we can go in and choose a font. The first font I see is this one here. I've used it before, which is a bold italic font. So I'm going to use that. We can make some choices here. We can choose the font size. Right now I've got my font set to 40. My font color is a certain color, but hold on for a second. Maybe I don't want a black font against that background. Maybe I want to, what I call Debbie Travising my picture, and try to do something that's more, you know, matches the color theme that's already there, the yellows or the browns or the blues. So to create some contrast, again, I want to have something dark against a light blues, but I might want to choose, I could choose the color from this stem here, which is a green, or from this stem, which is a green, or from this leaf in this tree, which is a green, or I could grab one of the darker yellows in this flower. And the way that I would do that would be to use this, my color picker. So by choosing my color picker, I could go in and maybe grab a piece of this flower. Make sure you're on the layer that you want to be on. So I'll go with this one here. I can grab the dark from that flower, or I could grab green, even though it looks even darker than that. Or I could grab that green and put a different type of shadow. Or any one of these yellows would probably work as well. So I'm going to go with maybe this yellow here. It seems to have a good contrast. And I'm going to use that for my font color. So I'll choose that. I'll go back and choose my text tool. I've already set my text size. I've already chosen a font from my list. And again, you can install a font if you wish. And we can choose to either left justify our text, or right justify our text, center our text in a box, or even do it filled so that it fills the entire box. For now, I'm just going to leave it left justified. I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to start typing. And we'll give the name Dylan and the year 2013. And you can see it's kind of gone right off the screen. So I probably want to move that text box around. To do that, I'll grab my move tool. But you need to be careful. If you just click inside the box here, you're not actually on the text, you're actually moving the background. And I can see that happening actually right here. So if that happens, Control Z right away. Put that background back. Don't try to place it by hand, put it back that way. So with my move tool here, I'm going to click on the color right on a letter, and then I can move that. All right. If I want to go back in and make some changes to that, click on your text tool again, click in that box, and then you can select your text and make other changes. If you don't click in the box and you just click your text tool again, it will just create a new text box, which is probably not what you want. All right, so I'm quite happy with that text right now. I'm going to just show you something that we don't want to do. I want to put a shadow on my text. If I'm over too far this way and I add a shadow to this text, there's not going to be enough room for the shadow to appear. So what it's going to try to do is push back on the picture border, and it's going to shove the background over, and we're going to have some transparency there, and we don't want that to happen. But I do want to demonstrate it just so that you can see. So I have my my text selected here. If you want to select it this way, we can grab that, select the text that way by using our text tool, and again selecting inside the box. We're going to go up to filters, and we're going to go to light and shadow, and we're going to put a drop shadow in here. Now the drop shadow, it has an offset of X and Y. Play around with those. See, basically just says how many pixels away from the letter do you want the shadow to be. 6 pixels to the left, 6 pixels above. Blur radius just means how sharp do you want your shadow to be. If I want it to be less sharp and a little bit blurrier, I can choose to make this 15 or 20. Thing is, play around with it, try it. You want to play around with the color of the shadow? Do that. I'm going to leave mine black. How much do you want to be able to see through the shadow? Well, if I move the opacity down this way, it's going to be fainter and fainter. If I move the opacity this way towards 100, it's going to be a stronger shadow. So I think I'm going to try it at 75 to see what happens. And I'm going to click on OK. You can see what happened is that, just like I said, the shadow didn't have enough room, so it shoved over. Okay? We don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to Control Z that and say, okay, I want to make a shadow on that, but what I need to do first is make sure my text is moved far enough away from the edge of that picture. Okay. Go back into my filter. Actually, make sure I select my text first. Select my text. Go into my filter, light and shadow. Put in a drop shadow. Settings stay the same. Click on OK. And now I have a nice complementary shadow beneath the text. And I like that. Now if I want to move that around, again I can grab my move tool. Make sure you're on top of a letter. Uh-oh. My word came, but my text, my shadow didn't. Well, this gives you some ability to be a little bit creative. You can actually change where your shadow is. Maybe you'll just decide you want to go with the shadow. But what happens if you want to move those two together? Well, I'm going to Control Z that one. I didn't mean to do that, right? Okay, well, let's lock those two together before we move them. Lock, lock. Now those two layers are linked together. When we move one, the other one will move as well. Again, making sure I have my move tool. I'm going to slide this around. You can see that I can place it anywhere. Okay, I like that. I may want to take my drop shadow and move it down so that I can put it behind a layer. What if I want it to be able to go behind the baby's head and the tulips? I can move my drop shadow down. I can click on this layer, use this arrow, and move it down. And they're still locked. So if I move this now, you're going to see that you get that magazine kind of thing where you can put text behind somebody's head, like on a Cosmopolitan or a GQ or something like that. Or I can have it partially hidden by one of the flowers. So it gives us some cool techniques that we can use. But all intents and purposes, I'm just going to leave this here like that. So I'm quite happy with that. Let's see what else we can do. If we want to do it something that's more memorial-like, or we want to make kind of a ghostly image, we can always click on the baby layer and move the opacity down. And you notice that just the baby layer is starting to fade somewhat. And it gives it that ghosty kind of look. It'd be very sad to have to make a memorial card, but If you did, you see sometimes people do those types of things. And that's how you would do that. It's a very simple process. All right, the last thing that we want to do is we want to do a non-destructive layer. So we're going to add another layer to this, but what will be on that layer will be absolutely nothing. So I'm just going to go to Layer and New Layer. So that makes my new layer. I'm just going to type it and call it Etch-a-Sketch because it's just a place that we can draw, we can do all kinds of things that we want to do, but we're not going to be destructive to any of these other photos within here. It's going to be like a plate of glass that we can write upon and make things maybe a little bit more interesting or add some other techniques. So I'm going to say OK, and here's my Etch-a-Sketch layer. And I'm going to take that layer and just move it on top of everything. And so basically right now, if we turn off these layers and just look at this, that's what that layer looks like. It's just a blank layer. So what I want to add to that layer is I want to add another filter here. So we'll go back into light and shadow, and maybe we'll go into a gradient flare. And I'm going to choose, we can go through Bright Star, Classic, Default, Distant Sun, G-Flare, Hidden Planet, all kinds of different things we can choose. I'm going to choose Distant Sun, and then I'm going to go over to the settings. Now within the settings, we can change how big it is. Okay, make it very large, make it very small. What are we trying to do? Maybe we're just trying to put a sparkle on a tooth or something. So we're just going to be very small, or a glimmer in an eye, we're going to be very small, or we want to be very dramatic, so we're going to make it very big. Today we're going to be dramatic, we're going to make it big. Rotation, you're going to see that we can rotate that, so it rotates. We can also change the vector angle. The vector angle are these little bubble things right here that sometimes you see in lens flares on cameras. And we can actually change which way that's pointing or coming down if we want to maybe notice it a bit more. So I'm going to put it out this way, and I'm also going to change the length of it. I can make it longer, I can make it shorter, so maybe I'll just leave it there like that. I'm going to say OK, I'm happy with everything. I'll click on OK, and you'll see that we have this huge flare happening here. Now let's bring back our players. Turn on, turn on, turn on, turn on, turn on. Now obviously you can see that we don't want that right on top of the baby's face. We want to move it backwards somewhere, behind something. So I want it to go behind the baby's head. So I'll grab this Etch-a-Sketch, and I'm going to take that non-destructive layer and I'm going to move it behind the tulips. Then I'm going to move it behind the baby's head. And you can see that we have, and then we can always move that around within that picture and find a good placement for that. And that looks kind of neat. If you wanted to, you could actually move it behind the text and see what that looks like, and do something like that. Or again, we can move it back where we had it before. I like it behind the baby's head, so I'm going to put it right behind the baby's head, make sure I have that layer selected, and then I'm going to make sure I have my move tool, and I'm going to pull that right back in behind here. Now I'm quite happy with that. I probably should have been saving as I went along, because we run into all kinds of problems when we don't save. If your computer freezes, for example, I did this video the first time, made it the whole way through, and my computer froze, so I'm redoing it. Anyways, let's go ahead and finish this. So let's make sure that we file and save this one again. We've got like 6 layers. We want to choose where we're going to save it. So I'm going to put it in my folder here, in my graphics, back in my practice modules, and inside the transparency text shadows baby tulips folder. I don't want to put it inside the originals, so I'm just going to call this one baby_tulip, and it's going to be an XCF file, which is going to save it as a project file, which will maintain all of the layers. So if our client makes a change, decides that they want to alter something, use different flowers, different background, I don't have to redo everything that I've done. I just have to maybe insert a new layer and make a few changes. So I'm happy with my baby tulip, and I'm just going to click on save. saving it there to my folder. And the last thing, if you want to email a copy of this to somebody, again, you'd probably want to go File and Export it this time. When you export, you're going to squash everything. You can export it as a PNG, as a GIF. It depends on if you want to maintain transparencies. But again, everything is going to be squashed. Now I want to save this as a JPEG, so I can also email it, so I can get some feedback from my boss or my client. So I'll just scroll that down. I'll look for JPEG. I'm going to choose JPEG, and that's going to add the JPEG sign there, and I'm just going to put _V1. So this is version 1. Now I'm going to try this one out and send it out. So I'll click on Export, exporting to the same folder that I have everything else, but not into the originals. Export. I'm going to make my quality as high as I can, just so that my manager or my client can see it in the best quality. And then I will export that, and I should be done. Double check your folder to make sure that your project went where you expected it to go. And double check your folder. So let's go in here. Multimedia, graphics, practice modules, my transparency folder. And within that folder I have both my XCF and I have my version 1. If I were to double click this one here, it's going to open in my default photo editor, my default photo program on my computer. So it's opening that, and there is the picture that we completed, and that's what your client or manager would see, received in an email. And if I close that, I can double click on the XCF, and that should open GIMP. And you notice that when that does open in GIMP, all of the layers are maintained, so we can make some changes, make some color changes, adjust brightness and contrast, do a lot of different things. So that is the project, and I hope you learned something. And remember, the only way that you get better at this is to practice, practice, practice. Thanks, and have a great day.